So we've come to our final sermon in our walk through the book of Proverbs, and today we're going to look at what Proverbs has to say about the topic of guidance. And this is an incredibly important topic, I think, for all of us, because if there's one thing that we all want from God, next to salvation itself, it's guidance. We all want to know that we're not all on our own down here, right? We want to know that there's a God who is guiding and directing and helping us navigate the many challenges of our life. We need guidance from God because basically every day of our lives, we are faced with important choices that can change the trajectory of our whole life. Right? Should we go to this college or that college? Should we take this job or that job? Should we marry this person or that person or no person? Should we stay living here or should we move somewhere else? We have some extra money. Should we save it or should we spend it? And if we spend it, what should we spend it on? And for that matter, if we save it, how should we save it? And what are we saving it for? And on it goes. We need guidance. Because we want to make wise decisions that bless us and bless others, right? Not foolish ones that cause us and others harm. And fortunately for us, the book of Proverbs has quite a bit to say to us about the subject of guidance. But what it has to say might surprise you. So let's take a look. If you ask the book of Proverbs, how do I get guidance? One surprising answer it will give you is this: diligence. Proverbs 21 verse 5 says, "The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste leads to poverty." Proverbs says, you want to be guided through your life to a good end? Well, don't just sit around all day waiting for God to do it for you. You work hard for it. And this makes sense, I think, if you think about it. Like, say, if you're a parent with a 4-year-old child, right, you give them everything, right? You give them food and shelter and clothing and toys and great experiences and love and everything, and you expect nothing from them in return. And when your kid is 4, that's fine, right? That's the way it's supposed to work. But when your kid is 40, if they're still expecting you to give them everything and expect nothing in return, then that's a problem. If you're doing that when your kid is 40, we all know you're not helping anymore. Now you're just enabling their bad behavior to continue. So you want guidance for your life? Proverbs says, don't just sit around all day doing nothing, waiting for it. You work hard. You be diligent. And that's not bad advice, is it? But here's the problem. We all know already, don't we, that that's not an ironclad guarantee. The plans of the diligent don't always lead to profit, do they? Because we all know people who have worked very, very hard in life and through no fault of their own have gotten absolutely nowhere. And at the very same time, we all know people who have been incredibly lazy in their lives, and yet good things seem to always happen to them in spite of them. And Proverbs seems to recognize this. Because if you look at everything that Proverbs says about guidance, you'll also see verses like this. Proverbs 16, verse 25 says, "There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death." In other words, you might be very diligent and work very hard only to discover that you're working hard at the wrong thing. And even if you could always choose the right thing, Proverbs 27, verse 1 says to you, "Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring." We might be able to control our goals and our efforts in pursuing them, but you can't always control your circumstances. And so being diligent, not bad, but it's clearly not sufficient. It might end up upping our batting average a little bit. We'll be more likely to end up in a good place if we are diligent than if we aren't. But that's not a guarantee. And so we know we're going to need more than just that. And so Proverbs has another surprising answer for us. You want guidance? Proverbs says, here's what you need: character. You think, character? Really? I mean, nothing against character. I'm all for character. It's a good thing. But what does that have to do with guidance? Proverbs 11, verse 3 says, the integrity of the upright guides them, but the unfaithful are destroyed by their duplicity. Likewise, Proverbs 12, verse 5 says, the plans of the righteous are just, but the advice of the wicked is deceitful. Character makes a difference, according to Proverbs. If you are a person of integrity, if you are a righteous person, you will be much more likely to make wise decisions that will lead you to good ends. And I think that's true. In fact, I was thinking about this just this last week. Many of you know that we are in the process of searching for a new principal for our school. And I've had several meetings over the last few weeks with our call committee, and I just couldn't stop thinking about these verses. Because we have a really great call committee. Every person on that committee is a person of high integrity and strong faith. And they are wise and selfless and thoughtful and everything else you would ever want in a call committee. And I was thinking about this. I have no idea where this search is going to end up. We certainly need God's guidance, and I'd ask all of you to pray for that. But already, I feel very confident that our search is going to end with a great result because of the integrity of the people in the room. The integrity of the upright guides them, Proverbs says. And I think that's absolutely true. But again, is that an ironclad guarantee? I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. You all know Billy Graham died. And by all accounts, Billy Graham was a person of high integrity, right? Early on in his ministry, Billy Graham took some very public and very concrete steps to make certain that he would never fall into financial misconduct or sexual misconduct or any other ethical problems. And he didn't. And yet, even with all of that, there is still a stain on Billy Graham's record. And it came up a lot in the midst of all these tributes to his amazing life. When the Watergate tapes were released back in the 1970s, a conversation was discovered that Billy Graham had in the Oval Office with Richard Nixon. And Billy Graham was caught on tape saying some absolutely terrible anti-Semitic comments. And of course, he later apologized for this, I'm sure authentically, but the damage was done. And it underscores the point for us today. Character is important. Character does guide you. But just like with diligence, it doesn't guide you perfectly, because we're all sinners. And so Proverbs offers to us another solution: others. You want to be guided through your life to a good end? You need other people. Proverbs 12, verse 15 says, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Likewise, Proverbs 15:22 says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Proverbs says, don't try to go through life all alone and make all these big decisions by yourself. Right? You'll tend to do much, much better if you seek the advice and counsel of others. But again, we got to ask, is that a for sure thing? Is a good ending guaranteed if we seek the advice and counsel of others? To answer that, I consulted one of the great scholars of our time, Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon has this great bit on the Tonight Show you may have seen called #BadVice, short for bad advice. He asks his viewers to submit to him via Twitter some of the worst advice and counsel they've ever gotten from other people. And here's a few of the many examples that he's received. I like this one. Let's take a look. Don't worry, baking soda and baking powder are the same thing. Bad advice. I've done that, actually. Here's another one. Just drill a hole into the bottom of your iPhone 7 for a headphone jack. Bad advice, right? Here's another one. This one reminds me of my childhood. As a kid, after I got dizzy from spinning around, my big brother told me, just spin the other direction to cancel it out. Bad advice. I also like this one. I was a senior in high school and someone told me my blinker was out and needed blinker fluid. I went to AutoZone and asked for it. Bad advice. One last one. Bought a car that smelled like cigarettes and was told vinegar would fix it. Now my car just smells like pickled cigarettes. Bad advice. So again, you see, getting the advice and counsel of others, it's not a bad thing, right? It's a good thing. It will probably help you more than it will hurt you. But is it perfect? Not by a long shot. And so you think about this, where does all this leave us? I mean, if you can't count on diligence or character or even the advice and counsel of others to guide you perfectly, then where do we go? And the answer Proverbs gives, not surprisingly, is God. You look to God for guidance, but not in the way you might think. Because you see, when we talk about guidance, what we all really want in our heart of hearts is for guidance to be given. Let me show you. One of my favorite passages in the book of Acts is this little snippet from the missionary journeys of St. Paul, and here's what it says. Take a look. Paul and his companions traveled throughout the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. So they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Now, this is the way we all want God to guide us, right? We want guidance to be given. You think you want to go to Bithynia? Jesus appears and says, "No, don't do that." You're wondering whether you should go into Macedonia or not. You see a vision of a man saying, "Come over here and help us." This is the way we want guidance to work. And of course, God can do this sort of thing. I mean, obviously, he's doing it here. But even in the Bible, this kind of thing is relatively rare. Most of the time, this is not how the guidance of God works. Most of the time, it works more like this. Guidance is not something God gives you, It's something God does for you. I heard a brother pastor say that years ago in a sermon. I thought, that's fantastic. I've never forgotten it. And it's the most important thing I'm going to teach you today. And so let's say it again together. Will you say it with me so we remember it? Guidance is not something God gives you. It's something God does for you. So, for example, Proverbs 16, verse 9 says this: "In his heart, a man plans his course, but the Lord directs his steps." Now, that's not saying God's going to give you guidance so that you don't take any wrong steps, right? It's saying, no, you're going to chart your own course, sometimes well, sometimes poorly, but in the midst of both your bad and good decisions, God will be guiding you. How about this one? Proverbs 19, verse 21. It says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." And again, you see, it's not saying God's going to give you guidance so that you don't make bad decisions. No, it's saying the Lord's purpose will prevail in your life no matter what you do. Same thing for this very famous proverb, Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Many of you know this one, I'm sure. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." You get it? He's not going to help you work really hard and make your path straight on your own. No, he's going to do it for you. And for some of you sitting here today, maybe this reality will disappoint you a little bit, because you're really looking for guidance in a very specific situation. Now, you really want guidance to be given you, which is to say, you want God to just tell you what to do. But you see, this should encourage you, because it means that God's plan for your life is not dependent on you figuring things out correctly. It's not up to you to make all the right decisions. God's plan for your life is not a big puzzle that you have to put together on your own. Proverbs says God is putting it together for you. Whether you see it or not, whether you understand it or not, God is guiding your life. Now, of course, you might then say, well, yes, I know it says that, but how do I know that for sure? Do I have to just take him at his word? And again, the surprising answer is, no, you don't. I mean, of course, you can take him at his word, and you should take him at his word, but in this particular case, you actually don't have to. Because God has not just said that this is true. He has proven it to be true beyond a shadow of a doubt in the life of Jesus Christ. You just think about some of the things we've talked about today in the light of Jesus. Right? No one was more diligent than he was. Luke says he set his face toward Jerusalem, determined to accomplish his mission. And Jesus, of course, didn't just have good character. No, he had perfect character. No sin. And if relying on others is important, well, then Jesus is the model there too, because the very first thing he did in his public ministry, before he did any teaching or miracles or anything, he formed a little community of 12 disciples around him. So Jesus did absolutely everything Proverbs is telling you to do. And yet on Good Friday, it didn't appear to guide him to a very good ending. But of course, we know now what they didn't know then, that the Lord's purpose was prevailing through it all anyway. In that very moment, when everything appeared to be ending in total disaster, God was, in fact, doing his greatest work. And don't you see, if that's true, then the same thing is true for you and your life. Because God is always doing more than you know. Sometimes you will make good choices and things will go well for you. Sometimes you will make bad choices and things will go very poorly. And sometimes things will go poorly despite your wise decisions and your hard work. But none of those things tie God's hands at all. The Lord's purpose will still prevail, no matter what. And that, my friends, is a promise you can take to the bank. Why? Because guidance is not something God gives you. It's something he does for you. Let's bow our heads and pray.